Let's go now from the West Coast to the Lone Star State of Texas. Every Friday evening, prison inmates in and around Houston tune into a radio program that was created just for them.
But the show, broadcast on a publicly funded station, has other audience members too, as VOA's Greg Flakus told On Assignment's Philip Alexiou when we first brought you this story in July.
KPFT, may I have your name and where you're calling from?
A main feature of the weekly prison show is the call-in segment, where people can address their imprisoned loved ones.
Richard, I just want to say I love you, and my birthday passed. I know your birthday's coming up too.
Many of the people working on the show are former convicts, including producer David Collingsworth, who first listened to it in a prison cell.
It showed me that somebody cared. Somebody was actually out there that cared.
Really appreciate it.
He says the show welcomes all callers, but there are often familiar voices on the line.
We can name all the regulars that call in, and we're a part of their lives.
Hey, Greg, how did the show get started? What was actually the inspiration behind it?
Well, a former convict from Texas prisons named Ray Hill started it in 1980, and it attracted an audience right away because there were a lot of prisoners at that time who had really no connection with their families, especially if the family lived far away from where the prison was. And at that time, they weren't allowed telephone privileges. So the radio show served as a sort of a connection between prisoners and their families. People could call into the show and give a message to whoever it might be in prison. In addition to the regular staff, the prison show counts on a number of expert guests who discuss subjects like prison health care, legal issues, and the death penalty. Attorney Bill HABERN informs listeners about civil and legal rights in the prison system.
We feed inmates information, and we feed families information.
The interesting thing is that they've also attracted an audience that goes beyond that community. They now have listeners not only around the United States on the internet, but also in 25 different countries.
Now, an ex-con started this, so is the show run by primarily ex-cons?
Yes, I would say so. Most of the people that are working on it, the producer, the on-air people, for the most part, are ex-convicts. And they, of course, bring a personal perspective to it. And as the producer told me, he became aware of the show when he was in prison, listening to it on his little transistor radio in his cell. The show sometimes features live music performed by former inmates like Dennis Price.
Well, now I'm locked away.
His experience emerges in many of his songs, but Price says he wants to move on.
I want to be a good person for my son, but it is a chapter in my life, and I've learned from it, and I think that it's made me who I am.
If you can imagine somebody who makes a mistake, ends up in prison. He's not necessarily a really terrible person. He's not, maybe an armed robber or something like that, but he's somebody who's made a mistake and he ends up in prison. He's terrified. He doesn't know what to do. He's out of his element. So having someone who can kind of give them some guidance and let them know that there's someone else out there who's thinking about them. Someone, they're not completely alone and isolated in the prison. There are people on the outside who do care about these issues.
And as they say in Texas, that's some boot scooting music right there. Cool story there from Greg Flakus.